This is one of those worship services that has, in many respects, one of those sub-themes running through it. If you notice with some of the music that's being shared and which will be appearing throughout the scripture message, sometimes it's like a voice over here and a voice over there, and then somewhere, somehow, it all starts to come together into one voice. It's like a piece of praise, and then another piece, and it comes together. So with that in mind, as we enter into hearing the gospel lesson for the day, our gospel lesson is Luke's telling of the Easter resurrection story. But on the first day of the week, at early dawn, they came to the tomb, taking the spices that they had prepared. They found the stone rolled away from the tomb, but when they went in, they did not find the body. While they were perplexed about this, suddenly 2 men in dazzling clothes stood beside them. The women were terrified and bowed their faces to the ground. But the men said to them, "Why do you look for the living among the dead? He is not here, but has risen. Remember how he told you while he was still in Galilee, that the Son of Man must be handed over to sinners and be crucified, and on the third day rise again." Then they remembered Jesus' words, and returning from the tomb, they told all this to the 11 and to the rest. Now it was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary the mother of James, and the other women with them who told this to the apostles. But these words seemed to them to be an idle tale, and they did not believe them. But Peter got up and ran to the tomb. Stooping and looking in, he saw the linen cloths by themselves. Then they went home, amazed at what had happened. Amen. Some of you are aware that I had the gift of being able to be a campus minister for 2 years at Higazian University in Beirut. While there, I also was officially listed as a professor, marginal, also the director of financial aid. That was in title only. But the real gift was to be the director of spiritual life. And I was able to enter into a number of conversations with people over the years. And in my first year, one of the individuals, Suha, who was an English professor, and I would often end up having long walks and conversations together. Suha had grown up in Lebanon and was a person who had grown up in a non-Christian tradition. She had spent time learning to meditate and pray at Hindu monasteries. So Suha was a person who really would be defined more as what we would call spiritual rather than religious, as she took many of these different pieces and brought them together. I like to also think of myself as a spiritual person, and maybe that's why Suha and I would take these long walks, often along the promenade in Beirut, along the edge of the Mediterranean Sea. But because Suha had grown up as a non-Christian, she often would refer to stories about Jesus from non-Christian perspectives. One of which, when we would sometimes talk about the resurrection, she would end up saying, and you know the real story about what happened on Good Friday and Easter is that on Good Friday, when it came time for Jesus to be seized and crucified, they magically covered his face and he was disguised before them, and in his place was substituted another person, and sometimes the reference was, and that was Judas. So Jesus really wasn't crucified, but went on to live the rest of his life in India. Well, there are parts of the world that's the story. And that's the story they believe. And as Suha would be recounting the story to me, in a sense correcting what I believed and my understanding of a story that's central to my faith, I would start to feel my blood pressure going up, and I would feel myself stumbling over my words, and the next thing you would also see is my face turning bright red. Actually, I can't see my face turning bright red, but I know what it feels like, and I know what it looks like to others. And anybody who's been in conversations around me knows that I'm a terrible poker player, or would be, because you know what I'm thinking all the time and feeling. And so as she would be doing this and talking about this, and my blood pressure is going up, and she would be talking about the story of Good Friday and Easter morning as if it's just another idle tale where something magical had taken place, where Jesus had actually been substituted and really didn't die, and where he went on and lived life, a totally different life in a totally different country. I'm thinking in myself, this is not the story. This is not my story. And it corrupts my faith. Because for me, it's not an idle tale. It changes the story if it's not Jesus on the cross. It changes the story if he doesn't die. It changes the story if someone else is substituted in. In my story, it really is about Jesus dying on the cross. And it really is Jesus of Nazareth who is placed in the tomb, and that stone is rolled in place and the tomb is sealed. It really is Jesus of Nazareth who experiences resurrection and new life on Easter morning. That's my God. This is my story. Now I know when we start to talk about resurrection as Christians, we don't all look at resurrection the same way. One of the pieces that's true is when you start to look at the accounts in the four Gospels and in the Pauline letters, is that you begin to discover that there were many different ways that those early disciples experienced resurrection. For some, it was this, I can touch and I can feel. For others, it was almost like a magical experience. For some, it was a spiritual experience. For some, they saw it in the face of another person. For some, they heard the voice of Jesus in the sound of speaking. What we know is that those early disciples each had a very different kind of way of experiencing resurrection. And yet they all talked about it as resurrection. What we know is that those early disciples had seen their world coming to an end on Good Friday, as Jesus dies on the cross, as he's crucified, as he's placed in the tomb. They're seeing everything that they understand about what he was teaching falling apart. And then on Easter, they begin to have encounters. They begin to have experiences over here and over there and a few days later. And their experiences and encounters are with the resurrection, with new life, with new beginnings. And so if you have this magical face covered over and he's hidden away and he snuck away in the middle of the night to a place like India, it dismisses it all. Because the God that I follow, the God who comes to me on Easter morning in resurrection, is a God of life. It's a God of new beginnings. The God that I embrace and that I know you embrace. It's the God that we talk about on Easter morning with Easter resurrection and Easter celebration. It's the God who brings life out of nothingness. It is the God who brings the green blade up from the earth when the earth is barren. It's the God who brings that sprout out of the tube that produces the flower. It's the God who brings new love into a loveless relationship. It's the God who brings new hope to the person who's drowning in addictions. It's the God who we meet when we're having our midlife crisis. Or as a certain young man over here reminded me about, the quarter life crisis. You need to talk to him to find out what a quarter crisis is. But it's a millennial expression. Sometimes when we're down and out, we feel as if there's no life, no hope. And yet our Easter God is a God who brings new life. Easter is about having hope where hope is lost. And yes, it can be miraculous. You've seen miracles happen. I've seen miracles happen. We've seen that which we thought could not come alive, come alive. But that's what Easter's all about. And that's why, for me, it really is Jesus who comes alive on Easter morning. Because this is the nature of who our God is. Thanks be to God for Easter, Easter mornings, for empty tombs, for resurrection, for shouts of Alleluia, he's risen. Alleluia. Alleluia. He is risen. Amen.